Ladies and gentlemen, there are 7 acknowledged wonders of the world, and you are about to witness the 8th. Standing in the spotlight on Andre's Special Artist Profile today is the one and only Mr. Dynamite, the hardest working man in show business, the Godfather of Soul, the Godfather of Funk, Mr. James Brown, everybody! Give a big hand out there for James Brown. He would have been 81 years old today had he lived. And I want to dedicate this to all of my music-loving friends, especially those who love funk. Henry Hopkins, Henry Cooper, you name it. I want to dedicate this to all of you. Because if it wasn't for this man that I'm representing here today, we would not have had so many culturally and personally fulfilling conversations. That's right. James Brown innovated the funk music genre. That's a wonderful thing because a lot of people don't innovate anything. Innovation is a really important thing. Came a little bit from Africa, came a little bit from the blues, came a little bit from rock and roll. James Brown threw it all together and got the groove going. Now, I'm going to start out with my first CD introduction to James Brown, like with most of you. I was introduced to the music of James Brown on FM radio with I Got You, I Feel Good, and Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. And those were part of his funk process when he was actually innovating the funk genre itself. And today we're going to start out with Star Time, the 1991 box set. I got this from BMG around 1997. Didn't cost hardly a thing. But this is probably the all-time box set because it reflects the very innovation of a genre, and that is funk. It is not complete. James Brown probably has the biggest recorded catalog in terms of albums, bigger than even Frank Zappa's. I would say in his 73-something years, he died on Christmas Day in 2006, James Brown had to have released well over 30 albums. There were tracks that were actually used again and again or remixed, but the point is, he was not only an innovator in terms of music and a huge catalog, but remixing his own material before sampling. He'd take a song like Sex Machine and do it again and again in myriad different ways. He was like a one big human improviser, but, you know, enough hyperbole. I think James Brown's career speaks for itself. Here's the box set. It's got a great liner book that's still intact. Let's take a little quick look through that. Of course, it would take 3 or 4 liner books this size to really, there's early James Brown right there, to really get the idea of the breadth of James Brown's talent. There's James Brown with Hubert Humphrey on the Don't Be a Dropout campaign. James Brown had a huge cultural impact too. You know, we'll be getting to that a little bit later. Well, here's his discography. It goes on page after page like this. And the CDs, they are no big deal. I mean, they're just generic looking CDs, but the music on them are not. Now, the James Brown had a huge bevy of artists and a label called People that he belonged to. But mainly due to the fact that I don't feel that James Brown's entire recorded repertoire is necessarily representative of him as a whole, but more like little seeds that he planted, I'm going to focus on the career of the man himself today. And I'm going to start out with, in terms of standalone albums, probably the ultimate James Brown experience. And that is this one. James Brown presents the James Brown Show. The Apollo Theater presents in person the James Brown Show. Live at the Apollo, 1962. This album caught him at the transition between being a soul balladeer who did songs like I'll Go Crazy and Please, Please, Please and Bewildered and, Night Train and all of those songs, into a man who did, rollicking up-tempo music such as Think. I mean, this is the James Brown experience. He was a live artist, and even if you didn't see James Brown doing his spins and sweating and the capes and all that, I mean, James Brown's attitude just came across perfectly live. One of those live albums and one of those James Brown albums you just have to have. That goes without saying. Recently, a small budget label reissued this album. James Brown and his famous Flames tour the USA. It came out in 1962. I love James Brown's kind of pancakey process there. He just looks so energetic, even when he's standing still. This album has a song called Mashed Potatoes USA, which actually finds him not only going into more up-tempo tunes in the early 60s, but already beginning the funk process. You can see with the bass guitar interplay on this album. His funk starts to really happen here. This was released on the Hallmark label last year. It's nothing special in terms of packaging, but really an album worth getting. James Brown records, when they're reissued, don't stay in print long. Pick them up. Now, there's a lot of gaps in here because a lot of stuff I don't have or it's out of print or whatever. But this is another live album from 1970. Sex Machine. Bootsy and Catfish Collins are in the JBs at this point. This is just James Brown at his height. Look at those songs. I mean, most people who know James Brown know this album really well. And then we go on to another live album. Remember I told you you'd be seeing this? You know, Public Enemy actually were deeply inspired for their It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back album. The symbolism of feeling like you're behind bars, but looking out with wonderment. I mean, James Brown looks like he's in jail here, but his expression isn't that of anger, it's that of, you know, what's on the outside of this jail? Where's the freedom that I'm yearning for? Where is the revolution of the mind, as the album title says? Now, if you open the album up, you see James Brown in another position. I love that photo. He's free, and he's loose, and he's raring to go. Now, that artwork is very, very meaningful. And this album, again, comes from his greatest period, 1970-71. It's Live at the Apollo, Volume 3. I don't have 2, but if I ever see it, I'll get it. Vinyl, CD, whatever. Now, this is kind of a grail even on CD. James Brown, there it is. I had some of the cuts from this on Star Time, but I love this cover, and I love this album. Full-on funk on this one. Full-on funk. Public Enemy #1. I'm pretty sure that Public Enemy got their name from that song, but of course, you know, James Brown, you know, and Public Enemy are in tandem. King Heroin and that song are a couple of his anti-drug raps. Really interesting stuff. The Payback. You know, James Brown is at his absolute best on here. On The Payback, he's actually declaring, both in terms of his commercial success and in terms of the music, he needs a hit. You know, great with double meanings and implicit messages. I love that cover. The Payback, Doing the Best That I Can. You know, this double album really features James Brown on these 8 to 12 minute songs where the JBs just absolutely, you know, work right out. And Mind Power, I don't even want to go into how significant a song that is. This is where James Brown became more of a full-on album artist rather than finding new ways to reinvent his singles. Now, there's a big gap here, okay? Big gap. James Brown, Love Overdue. You know, the 80s were kind of, you know, he didn't always have the strongest material during that era. But this 1991 album really shows him in fine funk form from Scotty Brothers. He had already done I'm Real for them in 1988. My father has the Gravity album, but I don't have that on CD yet. But Universal James Brown doing the New Jack Swing. This album came out in 1991 or 92, I believe. 92. Again on Scotty Brothers. It had a hit with the ballad Georgelina. Kind of a sentimental type song. But James Brown really does the New Jack Swing well. In fact, you know, Teddy Riley, again, was probably inspired by James Brown. Just about every innovation in soul, funk, and R&B, I can't restate this enough, comes directly from something that James did. Now, over the past 7 or 8 years, they've reissued a group of singles collections. Because James Brown, in a lot of ways, is a singles artist. And this particular volume covers 1973 and 75. This covers 75 through 79. I got these primarily because I feel that James Brown's best period was during this time. He was transitioning from being a live artist to something of a studio musician. So, okay. That's what I have for James Brown. I want to give a shout out to all my funk-loving friends and those who love musical invention. And a very happy posthumous birthday to James Brown. And All of you musicians out there, especially Pharrell Williams right now, you know, clap your hands if you believe that happiness is the truth, especially if you're doing funk, because funk not only moves, it can remove something from your soul that's bad and put something there that's good and will make you do the dance of life. See you next time.